How do, Ranger Matt?
How are you? Good. Good to see you.
You know, there could be traffic.
I know. The great Jim Hessler, author of Sickles at Gettysburg, right here, will be signing autographs. We'll be signing autographs for the next 15 seconds. So if you happen to have your copy of your book, Jim, I'm selling books. Yeah. Well, did anybody look at the hard radar? I know what the phone said out. Did anybody look at the hard radar? Is anything coming?
We're good.
Weather
There like
radar.
soft radar?
It looks to maybe
I
improve
mean,
slightly.
I should reconsider that, restate that. Hard data. Does anybody have any hard data? I mean, what's actually in the sky?
Well, it's mist right now and clouds.
There's your
wet,
moment
it's
to moment.
raining.
Just as well done as your average weathercaster.
Yes. I trust them within a couple hours, though. You know? Oh, you did get shoes. Oh, well, that's cool. Golf shoes has come a long way. When the last time I tried to golf, they had those like metal spikes on them. You remember? They had like 5 of them on the bottom. You golf? Oh, way back? Has that been a long time ago? Yes. Last night I discovered that I have a new love for golf. I'm an avid fan. Thank you. Never trust a driver from New York. I will say, if that baby comes on this tour, it will probably set the record as the youngest participant of all time. I will say that.
Very smart. He's a baby genius.
That will be a record right there. I don't know if you ever thought that your newborn would be in a soybean patch this quick. So I don't know what to do. I'm taking it won't rain, and I'll do it from stop to stop. My original plan was, before I rode through here this morning, before going to work, was to go straight across. I'm not really worried about the water, whatever, the wet ground. I'm more worried about them soybeans. It's just going to have to plow through there, and then you can see how thick they are. So the alternative is, but the only alternative is to go around it, which is going to delay us a little more. We can go by the Thompson house, and I'll talk briefly about that. But what I was going to say is, my original idea was to try to cut this tour a little shorter to hedge our bets right here. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just all about face, and I'll get down here, and I'll get out of this road. Got a lot of people. Cold.
It'll be 5 months on September 2nd.
First. Y'all remember previous generation, you wouldn't let them out of the house till they were 6 months. You know? That's pretty cool. Oh, movie star. Hey. Everybody looking, where's the movie star? You got a movie star over here?
We know where the movie star is.
Oh, yeah.
You're getting recorded right now.
Yeah, Stuff Rider was telling me that last time that Bert has 200 more hits than I do on the last program. And then I said, wow. Now, they were sitting there, me and Stuff Rider were sitting here at the DQ, the mysterious Stuff Rider. And I was talking to him, I said, well, man, 2,200 hits. I mean, wow, we should do something with this right here. We should do something. I could be a movie star. And then Stuff Rider pulled up, I didn't know you could do this, but on YouTube you can pull up demographics. And basically my demographics are white males between the ages of 50 to 60. Do any of you happen to fit that? Yeah. Thanks for watching. Did you bring me that hat? No, you didn't bring me that hat. I thought about you the other day. I passed Messiah College. You didn't. I thought about you. The ongoing saga of Matt trying to achieve a Messiah hat. You ever pondered that? You never really pondered that. All right, normally I would walk over here to the edge and we'd look over toward the mountains, but I don't see what much good it does. You can't see anything anyway in all this fog. And if you look at it with you know, in the last 10 minutes that I've been here, it looks like it's getting even more foggy. So, you know, I don't predict once we get to the seminary what we're going to be able to see. You know, the stops are set up so you could see what Robert E. Lee could see on July 1st and what he couldn't see, which is equally important. So, you know, we'll just have to do the best we can under the circumstances right here. So the tour today is, obviously, you read the title, is focused on Robert E. Lee. And I was getting a question last night about how or maybe it was yesterday afternoon, is how I could focus a tour on Robert E. Lee on July 1st when he wasn't here for most of the day. And that's a relevant question. I mean, how do you do that? What the focus of the tour is supposed to be, and it'll work out better once again if we could see a further distance, is what does the battlefield look like on July 1st through Robert E. Lee's eyes? So, I mean, this is apropos for what we're doing here. Apropos. That was a big word. I'm trying to impress somebody with big words. Apropos. Delightful intellectual conversation here. We got the fog of war, is what I mean. So it's easy, and I do it too. Everybody does it. You can't be a public speaker and talking about history and not do Monday morning quarterback. But in order to try to understand the way that they were thinking back then, or Robert E. Lee for that matter, how he was thinking on July 1st, you have to set up the facts as they unfolded. What did he know and when did he know it? It's kind of like a detective case, if you want, a whodunit, you know, if you will, but it's a completely different way to look at it. Robert E. Lee does not have the information that we have today. It's easy for us to say, okay, he should have done A, B, C, and D, or his commander should have done A, B, and C, and D. But the beautiful thing about preserving the battlefield is you get to see, on most days, you get to see the same sights that they did. So what could Lee see? What information did he have in front of him? And what decisions could have been made based off that information? Pretty much as I get the tour started, I'll start with Lee crossing the Potomac and then quickly get into Jeb Stuart. And I want you to, it shouldn't be hard for you to pick up on this, I want you to see how many individual accounts I have of people talking to Robert E. Lee on July 1st and prior to the battle, and what his focus is. What is he worried about? What does he have in front of him, and what is he worried about that is not in front of him? All right, so to start with, let's take the big picture, as we always do. And this is a big picture, and unlike we usually do tactical maneuvers here. Let's do strategy right now. If you're Robert E. Lee, and you're the Confederate government, or you're the Army of Northern Virginia, or you're whatever, CSA, what is the purpose in the Eastern Theater of fighting all these battles from the Confederate standpoint? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, why go out? Okay, so the easiest explanation would be Robert E. Lee is trying to keep the Yankees out of Richmond. All right, well, that's true also. But what is the ultimate objective? Can the South, in other words, continue to fight all these battles and win? I mean, can they have a sustained struggle and carry it on? Do they have the numbers and the resources in order to do that? That's the fundamental question you have to ask yourself. And if you say yes, then obviously you're on probably the side of James Longstreet, at least in the post-war years. Longstreet advocated a rope-a-dope strategy. You know Muhammad Ali, when he got fat, he couldn't buy, you remember rope-a-dope? Okay, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Rope-a-dope. And if you'd like to, are we going to have a problem here? That's what I don't know, you know. So, if you think about it, rope-a-dope is where Muhammad Ali would lean against the ropes and let his opponent punch himself out. And then he would start, because he didn't have the energy to go 15 rounds right there. That's what Longstreet advocated. Have the Union Army attack the Confederates. Well, that's all fine and good in my opinion, as long as the Union, as Buck Showalter likes to say, as long as the other team is willing to abide by your wishes. That always works out pretty good, right? Huh? So, I don't know if that's feasible or not. So what's the purpose of fighting all these battles? If it's to defend Richmond, how are you going to win the war? How do you win the war from a Confederate standpoint? Can you win the war in Virginia?
You win a truce.
You can bring them to a truce, you know, maybe you're playing like Nixon in '72 with the linebacker campaign. That'll take you into some arcane military history right there. B-52s, you know. How do you get them to the peace table?
Increase the cost. For
You know.
civilian population.
Yes,
Cut the supply line.
cut the
Make
supply.
them not able to get to Richmond.
Make them not able to get to Richmond. The penultimate, which is very hard, I want you to look at this as the entire Civil War. The penultimate objective of any battle is to do what? Individual battle is to destroy your opponent. In the Civil War, how many times does that actually happen?
Eastern Theater, none.
Yeah. And really, I mean, if you look across the broad spectrum, all three theaters in the Civil War, what do? There's rarely a time where an army is destroyed. It's rarely a time where an entire army is captured. If you think about it from that standpoint, U.S. Grant seems to be on the majority of those when that happens right there. Why is that though? Because the firepower is so great in the 1860s that it is very hard to destroy your opponent. It's just too much. In destroying them and winning a victory, you beat yourself up so badly that you don't have anything left to finish right there. Everybody's in a good mood today. See, if you came to the tour, you'd know what I was waving at just then. No. Stuff Writer will have to put it on the screen. Okay. So as you know from the last tour we did with Stuff Writer at Willer's Brigade, I got a lot of comments that Stuff Writer wouldn't turn the camera around when he asked his question, the mysterious Stuff Writer. So I doubt that Stuff Writer is going to turn the camera around today. So what we're going to do, since the internet crowd cannot see this, is that every one of you, I say there's about 40 people out here, and the note writer, there she is right there, also on Willard. What we're all going to do is Stuff Writers at the front of the crowds, we're all going to point at him. So you can all point right now. Go ahead, just point. He cannot turn around. He has already been token that he cannot turn around. Now he has 40 people pointing at him. And now he gets a sense of what it's like to have a camera on him. Attention on him. What's the objective? What's the purpose of all these battles? How are you going to achieve it? In Robert E. Lee's mind, you can disagree with it, you can argue, we could sit over, we could go to the fine restaurant, eat, have a drink in the dungeon, and then go upstairs. In Robert E. Lee's mind, the way you win the war is you force the Lincoln administration to the peace table, like Nixon and linebacker 1 and 2. How do you do that? You force the Lincoln administration to the peace table, not by defeating them in Virginia, because they get defeated in Virginia. And what does that result in? Nothing. It's just a Pyrrhic victory, if I'm pronouncing that. Pyrrhic victory over there, all right? The way you get the Lincoln administration to come to the peace table is to have a sustained campaign in the enemy's territory where you are negotiating. This is true of anything you do in life, military, diplomacy, business, whatever else you want to do. You always want to be negotiating from a position of strength. And when you're on your heels, you are not negotiating from a position of strength. When you get out of the truck and an individual pushes your head down on the footrest right there, you are not negotiating from a position of strength at that point, as this guy is standing over you right there. That is not the time. So what does Robert E. Lee want to do? He wants to enter Pennsylvania and have a sustained campaign. I don't think he wants to fight the battle. He wants to have a sustained campaign where I don't know where he's going. You find dozens of articles speculating on where Robert E. Lee is headed. We just don't know, all right? Where he headed, east, west, wherever, north, whatever. He wants to be up here while the Confederate government is negotiating with the United States government. And actually, Davis was supposed to have a political contingent to that plan to go up to Washington and negotiate with Lincoln. If he can fight the Union Army to advantageous advantages, he'll do that. He's not locked into a certain plan. But I think he wants to be in Pennsylvania a lot longer than he's actually going to be. Because peace negotiations, drag out. Any questions, comments on that? So that's the big picture. So they fight the Battle of Chancellorsville. That's around Fredericksburg, Virginia. A lot of people consider that Robert E. Lee's greatest victory. They lose. Lee loses Stonewall Jackson permanently in that battle. He's mortally wounded. And then he's got to reorganize his army into 3 corps. Instead of 2 wings, Longstreet and Jackson, he goes with A.P. Hill, Richard S. Ewell, and James Longstreet. And then after he reorganizes his army, he slides off to the west and starts the slow march up to Pennsylvania, because he doesn't know what the Union Army is going to do. They could easily, in chess terms, any of y'all play chess? You play chess? You play chess? You play? No chess. You play chess.
Oh, yeah.
They're talking about swapping queens. Union Army takes Richmond, Confederate Army takes Washington. Lee's got to worry about that right there. So he slowly slides to the west, then he starts north through the Shenandoah Valley. He switches. This is not the colorful part that we study here at Gettysburg, but he also has to switch his base of supplies. His base of supplies is at Fredericksburg, and he has to switch it to Winchester. I'm asking you to know your geography right now, or to get your map out right here. So he's swinging his supply base further to the west. That's the rail hub he's going to use. Is he going to need the supplies? Technically, no, because he's going to feed off Pennsylvania. He can get the food from Pennsylvania, but he cannot make the citizens of Pennsylvania produce bullets. So you do have to have, even though it's not a hard supply line, you do have to have a tenuous, is that the right word? Supply line, reaching back to Virginia. And that plays heavily into Gettysburg. That's what most people overlook when they think about it. So on June 25th, Robert E. Lee, at the head of a victorious army, riding a crest of momentum, is going to reach the Potomac River, which is the border between basically the North and the South. And as he crosses, the band strikes up Dixie. And Robert E. Lee, you can imagine it a lot better than I can. Robert E. Lee rides across on Traveler with the band playing and the soldiers cheering and so forth. And he has, as Douglas Southall Freeman says, he has the hopes and wishes of his people riding upon his shoulders. I mean, can you think of anything else grander than that? The conqueror, if you will. I wonder what he thought when he crossed the river. Probably thinking about lunch. But knowing Lee, or he was thinking logistics probably. But when he got to the other side, there was a group of Maryland ladies there awaiting the conquering hero. Remember, there was Confederate sympathizers, especially in Maryland. And they have a wreath of flowers awaiting the commander. And so they attempt to place this wreath on Traveler. You know, like when you win the Kentucky Derby, they put the roses around One eyewitness said that the lady who was the spokeswoman for the group had a face, quote, like a door knocker. I will leave you to ponder, door knocker. Wish I could be anything. I mean, if you think about it. Could be flattering, I guess. Right there. Robert E. Lee does not, as a professional military officer, does not allow flowers to be placed on his horse. Okay? And so he, how do you say that? I'm reaching for all the big words I can think of today. Demurs.
Graciously declines.
Graciously declines right here, okay? And he passes it off to a staff officer. Now, I cannot imagine that the staff, which was always already undermanned, that the staff got too far down the road before the flowers took a ride. But I may be wrong. I don't know. Maybe they gave them to somebody. I don't know, or something like that. But it was a nice gesture. So Lee crosses. The next 2 days, he rides through Maryland and on to Chambersburg, Virginia, which is over here across the mountains. Lee establishes his headquarters at Chambersburg. I can never pronounce this or pronounce it correctly. Messerschmitt's Woods. I always want to say it like the German fighter plane right there, which may be pronounced that way. But it is, the last of it is S-M-I-T-H. A spot which is marked today. If you get on Highway 30, you go through Chambersburg, there's the state of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, has these blue state markers. And I believe when you come to the outskirts, that'd be the western outskirts of Chambersburg, there's a Taco Bell. All right? And so across the street, are you writing this now? Across the street from the Taco Bell is that state sign. But I think the actual site of Lee's headquarters is on the opposite side from the state sign. Some of it is still exist. I believe you have to go back behind the Taco Bell and the dead ends, the street dead ends back in there somewhere. I think that's roughly where he would be in that area. But you know, the cool thing about this, and the reason I'm going into so much detail, is this: you talk about pivotal moments of American history that get no attention. What I'm about to tell you occurs at this site. I mean, we've all seen it basically on the beginning of the movie Gettysburg, but this is the actual site that it took place on. All right. So while Lee is in Chambersburg, Fitzgerald Ross, who was another one of the foreign observers following Lee's army, said a Confederate flag marks the whereabouts, meaning the headquarters. There are about a half a dozen tents and as many baggage wagons and ambulances. The horses and mules from these, besides those of a small escort, are tied up to the trees or grazing about the place. So, the general advance when Lee is at Chambersburg, at least on the 27th, 28th, was to be forward toward Harrisburg. That's where the Confederate Army seems to be headed. Ewell's corps, who led the Confederate advance, and this is no fluke either, Ewell's corps contains most of the remnants of Stonewall Jackson's command. And if you never picked up on that, Stonewall Jackson's command was known for fighting, but they're also known for what? Marching. They were able to march long distances in short amounts of time. You don't put the slowest troops in the front, right? Because what happens to the rest of the army?
They have to wait.
They have to wait. So you put the fastest troops in the front. Ewell's corps is in the Rich Corps, licensed battlefield guide. 5'4" is in a mini car. I will speak to him about this when we get back to the visitor center. I will say, Rich, what is the meaning of this? Good guy. He's probably got the ultimate job, if you don't consider being a park ranger to be the ultimate job. Rich's job before he was here at Gettysburg was he worked for Hershey Park, and his job was to rob the train when it came by.
I remember being on that last.
You know what I'm talking about, yeah. They used to pull the train over and they come out and rob it. All that was fine and good until Hershey Park was open, Rich told me, for one Christmas, and they had Santa Claus riding on the train. and one of his co-workers shot Santa Claus in front of all these kids, which obviously resulted in high praise from the parents. Shooting Santa Claus. That's a great story. I mean, you can't beat that. Be a train robber. I mean, you know, what would you want to be in life? Oh man, you know, train robber. That's cool. That's very cool. All right, was that funny enough? All right, so Ewell's leading the advance on Harrisburg. Big caveat getting into this, I alluded to this earlier, is Stuart's cavalry, or the lack thereof. Lee needed reliable intelligence on the whereabouts of federal forces before advancing too far. What does the cavalry do in the American Civil War? Right? The eyes and ears of the army. They're supposed to be the reconnaissance for the army. They get out in front and they gain intelligence on the enemy, and they keep the enemy from gaining intelligence on you. They're a screening force right there. All right? So if you keep that in mind, Robert E. Lee does not have any screening force in front of him. Jeb Stuart, the original plan was to do what? Was for Stuart to ride around the Union Army, which is what? Roughly between Fredericksburg and Washington, and gain the Potomac River somewhere, cross the Potomac, and meet up with Lee in Maryland. Or if he couldn't do that, he was supposed to backtrack, if he didn't think he could ride around, and join the Confederate Army around Winchester, we'll say, to the west of in western Virginia, and join up and then screen the advance. Either way, Jeb Stuart's supposed to be in front of this army. Well, Jeb Stuart's not around. And here we get back to where I opened this discussion with. We're talking about the fog of war. We all know where Jeb Stuart is because we've read 1,000 books on Gettysburg. Robert E. Lee has no idea where Jeb Stuart is. And in tandem to that, he also has no idea where the Union Army is. Now, the Army, as I said, crossed on the 25th, but still no word from Stuart by the 28th. That's 3 or 4 days without word from Stuart. That evening, though, evening of the 28th, startling news arrived in the form of one of Longstreet's scouts that had come in. You could actually call him a spy in the loose sense of the term right there. And his name was what? Harrison the Scout. He reported to Robert E. Lee over here at Messerschmitt's Woods some startling information. There were, according to Harrison, who had just passed through the Union Army, at Frederick, Maryland, at least 2 Union Corps. And then, this is what gets lost in a lot of the translation. Not only is there a portion of the Union Corps in Frederick, there's 2 more corps over toward the South Mountain Range. In other words, they're taking, if you know your Civil War, your Maryland roads over here, they're taking 40 from Frederick, the National Turnpike, and they're headed toward Antietam. Or what would that be? Boonesboro would be more accurate, if you will, if you know the Antietam campaign. In other words, the Confederate Army is in peril because they may be moving behind them. You been to England? I was thinking about going. Why don't you come on out here and we'll take you two also. What's on the iPhone? What are you listening to? Is any rock on there? I mean, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, what do you got? AC/DC? I mean, that's what I was listening to. I'll get fired up. You're a shy one, aren't you? I'm going to pick on you too much. You come out here, though. You'll be a good city. You just stand there. Come on out. Come on, funny. Oh, here come the parents with the cameras. They got any more kids? How about you, Adidas? Oh, he's right on the edge. All right, so how we want to do this? We got enough people, obviously. Let's put you over here. Let's give you the easy one. All right, you're gonna be Washington D.C. All right, and so let's place you right up here. Okay, So this is Frederick, Maryland. This is where 2 Union corps are, right here, okay? And let's make you the other 2 Union corps. You're gonna be headed this way, all right? And let's say that you be headed this way, all right? And so let's make you, since you're the biggest one out here, let's make you the mountain range, all right? Okay? As you go out there, what are you doing? You want in? You can be the, well, no, you know, you can't, because you can't be a Confederate with that shirt on. Any more kids? I'll get you in it later. We'll do another human map later. I'm going to swap one of the kids. Oh, okay, a little bit. With the Boston hat, you going to shake his hand? Oh, really?
Things change.
Oh,
The war's over.
the war's over. Playoffs. Come on out here. I'll just swap you out. So, let's actually come over here, since he's wearing gray. This will work out. Let's make you the mountain range, and let's bring you up here and make you the Confederate Army, and you're headed this way. All right. So, if you think, I don't know how this is going to show up on film, but it doesn't really matter as long as y'all understand it, right? Because that's who it's for. All right, so who else? I think you're next up. All right, so come over here, and we'll put you back here. You stand right here. Going in ascending age. If you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a rehash. What you have right here, this fine young gentleman right here, is your nation's capital. A round of applause for the nation's capital right here. And right over here we have Winchester, Virginia, who I've spent many happy moments on Shenandoah Street. In fact, I was thinking about that in a local Gettysburg restaurant last night, when I got cut off for asking for a better pour on my wine. Apparently you don't do that in a fine restaurant. All right, so I was thinking the Blues Brothers.
Run blood.
Get shrimp too.
Champagne, you know. So anyway. That's one of those jokes, and I ain't gonna get that. All right, so if you think about it, so we got Winchester, Washington D.C. Mr. Yankee right here is the mountain range. All right, okay, and the gray shirt right here is going to be the Confederate Army. So here we have 2 portions of the Union Army. Remember Robert E. Lee? Harrison reports out of 7 Union Corps. He reports the whereabouts of 4 of them. How many does that leave out there that Lee doesn't know about? 3. You don't think that factors into Lee's thinking. I'm not saying there's some dark secret in there, but Lee has got to wonder where the other 3 are. You know, he would. He's an Army commander right here. So what the intelligence that is brought to Lee is saying is that the Confederate Army is in peril because there are 2 Union Corps moving toward the South Mountain Range. And if they cross behind the South Mountain Range, they can therefore get between Winchester and Robert E. Lee's army right here. That's not good. What Robert E. Lee wants to have happen, go back to where you were, over there and face him. What Robert E. Lee wants to have happen is this Union Army right here needs to stay on this side of the mountains, right here, in this area, okay? Matt's fan over there. So, oh, don't bully him. I feel sorry for him. So, true fan. So, if you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, how do you keep the Union Army on the eastern side of the mountains? How do you do that? If you're Robert E. Lee, and strategically speaking, how are you going to do that? So, the way he's going to do that is, hard to see him back there, but Washington, D.C., Robert E. Lee is going to do what? He's going to threaten the capital. That doesn't mean he's going to march all the way down there, but he's going to concentrate his army. I won't set anybody up for Baltimore, but he's got Washington, he's got Baltimore over here. Let's make a note taker over here, Baltimore, right here, and he could go to either one. Is he going there? No, he's not going there. But he's what? He wants the Union Army to think he's going there. He's also got a secondary problem too. When Harrison comes into his headquarters, which I might add are on the other side, basically right here, on the other side of these mountains right here, Robert E. Lee's army is scattered with Longstreet's corps, a couple other miscellaneous divisions on this side of the mountain. He's got the portion of his advance, Early's division, that's gone through Gettysburg and is headed toward York, if not already through there. And then he's got the rest of Ewell's corps, which is basically advancing toward Harrisburg. In other words, if Harrison is right, or if he's wrong, for that matter, might be a better statement. What if that Union army moves fast? What if they get here to Gettysburg? Well, we'll make this Gettysburg. And the Confederate army is what? Spread out here, spread out over here, etc. You got the junction of 10 roads right here. And the Union army can slice and dice as they please. So if you think about Robert E. Lee, what do you do if you're thinking through his eyes? How do you keep the Union army on the eastern side of the mountains, and how do you reconcentrate your army in the most effective and efficient manner? You look for a central point with 10 roads, okay? And you can funnel in a lot of men on 10 roads. Not that you're going to use 10 roads, but you have the capacity to utilize that, all right? And he looks at the map, and that's Gettysburg. He can achieve everything that I just said by coming to this town. He hedges, though, because he doesn't know maybe where those other 3 Union Corps is, or maybe Harrison's wrong about the direction the Union Army's moving in. He can't know that. So he issues a double-headed order, if that makes sense. He says to Ewell up here at Harrisburg, I want you to come back. And I want you to either meet me at Gettysburg or at Cashtown, which is basically halfway between here and the mountains. Lee is hedging his bets. If the Union Army is going to be here at Gettysburg, well, that's all fine and good. We'll just back up through the mountains. But the important thing is that Union Army doesn't cut off my advance. Right up here. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions about that? And so that's why Gettysburg is going to be coming up. But this, let me reiterate this one other time, all right? Robert E. Lee has got to trust the word of one spy. And spies are notorious for inaccuracies. You're sitting in Lee's tent over here at Chambersburg, and if you want to get down into the nitty-gritty with it, Harrison first went to Longstreet's headquarters, and Longstreet thought the information so important that he personally took Harrison over to Lee's headquarters. And when Harrison got to Lee's headquarters, Longstreet was going to have Harrison tell Lee personally what he had seen or found out, and Lee wouldn't meet with him. He wouldn't meet the spy. He said to basically to Longstreet, you know, if that's what he says or whatever, but Harrison never got to enter Lee's tent. Because, you know, whatever reason right there. That's what Lee thought of that. But the pivotal moment of the campaign comes down to this one guy. Right here. I think a better question to ask is, could Lee afford not to take Harrison seriously? If he doesn't take him seriously, if he's wrong, what ends up happening? It's the worst case scenario. All right, so this rolls into what? Why can Lee not verify Harrison's information?
No
He doesn't have any cavalry. All right, so they concentrate the army. So let's go back to Stuart. Throughout this time, Lee inquired after Stuart, Captain James P. Smith, who arrived at Chambersburg on June 29th, straight from escorting Stonewall Jackson's widow to her father's home in North Carolina. That's stuff you don't get every day. Saw Lee at his headquarters, quote, pulling on his gauntlets and preparing to mount Traveler brought to him by an orderly. Beckoning me to him, the general received me in his grave and kindly manner. He asked me where I came from, expressing his great loss by the death of General Jackson, and spoke with affectionate sympathy of Mrs. Jackson. Oh, I can just see it. Quite naturally, he asked me whether I had any knowledge of General Stuart.
Oops.
Smith responded that he had heard Stuart was bound for Pennsylvania. Quote, the general was evidently surprised and disturbed by this. has stated. The absence of Stuart led to Lee being blindfolded about the whereabouts to John Bell Hood. Lee said, General, the enemy is a long time finding us. If he does not succeed soon, we must go in search of him. To another group of officers, Lee remarked, tomorrow, gentlemen, we will not move to Harrisburg as we expected, but we will go over to Gettysburg and see what General Meade is after. June 30th. Situation right here is that Hill is at Cashtown. And on June 30th, he sends Pettigrew's North Carolina Brigade to Gettysburg on a reconnaissance. And we're at the perfect spot to talk about this. Pettigrew's North Carolinians, I don't know the exact spot. They may have gotten to Hare's Ridge, they may have gotten to here, maybe they didn't get even to either one of them. But they get to the outskirts of Gettysburg, which is in this general vicinity right here. And what do they see? And what do they hear off in the distance? They see Union cavalry. And by the way, Pettigrew takes his binoculars out. Remember, the infantry is doing the Confederate cavalry's job. Have you picked up on that? You just marched these North Carolina infantry because you didn't have anybody there that was supposed to do the job. So Pettigrew takes his binoculars out and he's looking to the south. I don't know, I'd love to know where he was looking. But he's looking off to the south and he watches them a while. These are veteran, he's not panicking. Pettigrew's not panicking. He's a veteran combat officer by now. But he's watching the enemy in the distance. And the way he notes that the way that Union cavalry is maneuvering is not like militia or National Guard. These men know what they're doing. They're maneuvering like regular cavalry do, U.S. Army cavalry do. They know what they're about. And that Pettigrew doesn't like that. Because if there's regular U.S. cavalry there, fog of war once again, what's behind the cavalry? And Pettigrew doesn't know. But his orders are what? Not to bring on a general engagement. So what does Pettigrew do? He reverses the North Carolinians and he marches them right back down this highway right here, and the Union cavalry just sort of follow him.
I have to steal Winchester. Sorry.
What are you talking about? You can't take Winchester.
No, we have to go. Sorry.
New Winchester. Sorry.
Who's the new Winchester?
England.
England? Where did you go? I never did place you, did I? All right, come over here and be... I'm about to break this map up anyway.
Winchester did change hands several times.
72 times, ma'am, and that statement really, really impresses me. That is about the only thing I can remember from that book, and I think I got it from that. Was it Who's Who? Or what was the interesting trivia facts? You know, everybody had one. They were ubiquitous back in the 70s and 80s. Burt Davis. What was the name of that thing? It was just trivia. It was like one trivia point after another. But that's where I got that from as a kid. 72 times. Aren't you glad to know that, Winchester? 72 times. All right.
There's going to be a test.
There's going to be a test. Now they'll know it. All right, so they get back June 30th. All right, so Pettigrew reports what he just saw at Gettysburg. And nobody seems to pay Pettigrew any attention. Pettigrew even recruited got one of his staff officers who was a pre-war acquaintance of A.P. Hill to go with him back to his boss's headquarters and report to him, because he thought this man Hill would take this subordinate of his more seriously than he was taking him, and saying what they saw that day. And Hill said, I am just from General Lee's headquarters, and he reports that the Union Army is doing what?
I've got to take them, so they're...
You're taking them
I know.
That the Union
They
Army...
don't want to go. We'll be back, I'm sorry.
You know what Jeb Stewart said about his father-in-law who stayed with the Union Army? He would regret that decision but once, and that will be continuous. Thanks a lot. All right, thanks a lot. What did Robert E. Lee tell A.P. Hill? he told A.P. Hill what Harrison had told him. And where's the Union Army moving? The Union Army's moving to the west. All right. So Hill's like incredulous that there's any Union forces in his front. You see how A.P. Hill gets set up for this? That's in Hill's defense right there. Okay, so guess what's going to happen? Lee moves with Longstreet's 2 divisions on June 30th, and by roughly 2 o'clock was encamped at a deserted sawmill outside of Greenwood, Pennsylvania. Good luck finding that one. Here Lee received the report that Pettigrew had bumped into Union cavalry that day. And still the sketchy information Lee possessed said the main body of the Federal Army was still at Frederick. All right, the night of June 30th, that's when Harry Heath, James Pettigrew goes to Harry Heath and in turn to A.P. Hill. And they start discussing what they should do the next day. Should they go back to Gettysburg? Heath would record after the war that he asked permission from A.P. Hill to go to Gettysburg to get those shoes. Are there any objections, General? And A.P. Hill reportedly responded, none in the world. And so on the morning of July 1st, Heath's division sets out. That includes Pettigrew's brigade, Corps, Division, Brigade, Regiment, right? Regiment, Brigade, Division, Corps. Heath's division comes down the Chambersburg Pike, headed toward Gettysburg. They are backed up by Pettigrew's division. That's roughly around 13, 14, 15,000 Confederate infantry, with roughly around, they probably had around 40 artillery pieces, at least, with them. That's a big contingent for reconnaissance. But there's no Stewart. All right, Heath pushes out front. Pender backs him up. They bump into the Union cavalry at 7:30. Lee starts on the morning of July 1st with Longstreet's command again. Only a few miles from Chambersburg, Longstreet and Lee found Edward Johnson's division pouring into the road. Lee ordered Longstreet's column to halt and to let Johnson's division come in. All right, I'm going to break up this map. Am I completely out of kids? Devoid of kids right now? How many points can I score here, dude? It's just not, I don't know. I don't know. Like 10, 20, I mean, what does it take? All right, so we're going to make you, you just go over here. I'm going to make you the Union Army in just a second. You come over here. Let's make you, come over here, England. And what we're going to do is, here's Longstreet. Here's Edward Johnson's division. Ewell's Corps, as I said earlier, I hope y'all are enjoying all this minutia. Because I went home last night at 10:30 and read up on this, just for your general benefit, with my cat meowing beneath my bed. I want you to know. I think it caught a frog or something. Anyway, if you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, Ewell's division had been recalled first, and Edward Johnson's, Ewell's Corps had been recalled first, and Edward Johnson's division was the one closest to the rest of Lee's army. So what does he do? He turns around, he starts marching. In the midst of all this, ladies and gentlemen, Lee decides, Harrison comes in, that's reported, Lee decides to concentrate the army at Gettysburg. This is evolving. So now you've got Johnson, who's coming back to Chambersburg to rendezvous with Robert E. Lee on the western side of the mountain. Instead, the orders are changed, and Lee wants to rendezvous on the east side of the mountain, which I've already explained. So here comes Longstreet's Corps toward Gettysburg. Let's make him Gettysburg right there. He's coming toward Gettysburg, and lo and behold, Johnson's division gets the orders, and they turn. And so what ends up happening is that this division and Longstreet's 2 divisions collide at an intersection. That's unexpected. And Lee, I'm telling you all this because it weighs into the day. It weighs into the story later in the day when Lee has to make a decision. Lee makes the fateful decision right then that Longstreet's Corps will halt and Johnson's division will go in front and lead the rest toward Gettysburg. All right?
That's slow behind fast. I mean, fast behind slow.
That's also, you're right. You're putting slow, well, Longstreet, pick your poison right there. You're putting fast, but the one thing that I will point out is neither one. The one thing that we think about infantry, but what we don't think about is the hundreds of wagons that are behind Johnson's division. You've not only got the infantry on the Chambersburg pike, you've not only got in front of that Pender's division, Heath's division, and all the wagons that go with that, and all whatever else goes with the moving division right here. And then you got Longstreet coming up. You got 6 Confederate divisions on the Chambersburg pike. That's not good. Yes.
So they obviated all those access roads by sticking 2/3 of the army on one road.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was just circumstance though.
Plus Johnson had the booty train.
Yes. Did you catch that?
I'm not talking about a strip club.
At this point, the park ranger just goes back to talking about the Civil War. Not Miss Lindsay. Out on 30, which I'm sure was a big distraction. If you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, the Confederate Army is going to be coming up through here, and they're going to get log jammed. Now, we know Union cavalry ends up opposing the Confederate advance right here. They end up delaying them. I need not tell you this whole story. And it all ends up right here where we're standing, getting into one of the biggest debacles of the Lee's army, Confederate Army during the entire war. The advance of the Confederates get within sight of the town of Gettysburg. Harry Heath, the division commander, is unsure of what he should do. He's not supposed to bring on a general engagement, but he's nevertheless got Union cavalry in front of him. What does he do? There's his objective. Heath is back over here. This fog's so thick you can't even see the ridge over there, but he's on the next ridge over out there, and he goes for it. Basically, he launches an attack. He's got Archer's brigade on this side. He's got Davis's brigade on the other side. They come up here, and the Union infantry shows up and gives him a big old bloody nose because he attacks piecemeal. In the midst of all this, getting back to Robert E. Lee, Lee has crossed the mountains, and what does he hear in the distance?
Artillery.
He's saying, yes, distant thunder. And he doesn't like that. So he's riding with Longstreet. He bids Longstreet goodbye and rides for the front. He arrives at Cashtown, and there he meets A.P. Hill, probably the shortest scene in the movie Gettysburg. Most of you probably never caught that, did you? A.P. Hill and Lee's meeting at Cashtown Inn? Oh, about 15 seconds, huh? No, didn't see it. We're having caramel popcorn at my house tonight. We'll watch the whole thing, which you cannot leave.
Do you have the director's cut?
No. I do have VHS though. You don't have that, do you?
No, I have it on VHS.
All right. What's wrong with A.P. Hill?
Not feeling well.
Not feeling well. That's an understatement of the year right there. He's not feeling well. Action being the ultimate elixir for Hill, he soon mounts up though and rides for Gettysburg. Okay, let's talk about Robert E. Lee. All right, thank y'all, I appreciate it. General Richard H. Anderson recalled that as Lee listened to the guns in the distance, he said, "I cannot think of what has become of Stuart. I ought to have heard from him long before now. He may have met with disaster, but I hope not. In the absence of reports from him, I am in ignorance as to what we have in front of us here. It may be the whole Federal Army." I didn't do it like Martin Sheen. The entire Federal Army. See, that's how I misquoted it. Martin Sheen didn't get it right. By the whole Federal Army, or maybe only a detachment. This is what the movie doesn't capture. If it is the whole Federal Army, we must fight a battle here. If we do not gain a victory, these defiles and gorges through which we are passing this morning will shelter us from disaster. Army commander always thinks the worst case scenario. They have to, or a good one does. If you don't, your name might be John Pope. Right? You have to Google that one, all right? Then you understand. We'll let John speak on that matter. Lee rode on down the Chambersburg pike. Campbell Brown, Richard Ewell's stepson, rode up to report that Ewell's corps had changed direction and were headed to Gettysburg. Now this is a young man. I think he's in his lower 20s. Now imagine this, riding up to Robert E. Lee at that age, and you're like a shaved tail captain or something. Lee then asked Campbell Brown, quote, with a peculiar searching, almost querulous impatience, did I get that one right? Whether General Ewell had heard anything from General Stuart, and on my replying in the negative, said that he had heard nothing from or of him for 3 days, that's Lee, and that General Stuart had not complied with his instructions. I see by a paper that he is near Washington. A scout reports, this is Lee speaking, a scout reports Meade's whole army marching this way, but that is all I know about his position. The curtness of Lee's remarks surprised the young staff officer. That's what you call pressure, ladies and gentlemen. Pressure. Lee is worried. Is he going bonkers or whatever, making bad decisions? No, but he doesn't know what's happening. All right. Lee arrives on the field probably around noon or 1 o'clock. That's going to be right over here on Hare's Ridge. Quote, on July 1st, General Lee and staff rode east from Cashtown about 3 miles from Gettysburg. Coming into the open country, he came in sight of the first day's battle. Turning into a grass field on his left, he sat on his well-bred iron gray traveler and looked across the fields eastward. Through the smoke rising in puffs and long rolls, he held his glasses in his hand and looked down the long slope by the seminary, over the town to the rugged heights beyond. A rod or two away, I sat in my saddle. Y'all listen to this. I know y'all are getting tired. Hey, you need to listen to this. You learn nothing else from this. A rod or two away, I sat in my saddle and caught the picture which is not faded from my memory, and grows more distinct as his years go by. He was 56 years old, with a superb physique, 5 feet and 11 1/2 inches in height, and about 175 pounds in weight, and in perfect health. It's interesting. He was a gentleman by blood and breeding, so truly that he was unmindful of it. He was plain and neat in his uniform of gray, so careful of his dress that there was nothing to attract attention. He wore a hat of gray felt with medium brim, and his boots fitted neatly, coming to his knee with a border of fair leather 1 inch wide. That means they what do you call it? Twisted over, folded over. He was himself a soldier and lived as a soldier in a tent and on the plainest fare. He knew neither tobacco nor cared for wine. Both examples which were not being set in front of you last night. An unruffled calm upon his countenance. Well, that's funny. An unruffled calm upon his countenance betokened the concentration and control of the whole being within. End of quote. All right. Lee has to ponder as he rides upon the field. He's got 2 brigades already been repulsed. What lies behind that ridge right there? You see the steeples over there. What is behind there? By this time, Rodes' division, we can barely see this, where you see that distant tree line up there, is going to be making their first attack from Oak Hill. Heath rode to Lee and said, "Rodes is very heavily engaged. Had I not better attack, General?" Lee replied, "No, I am not prepared to bring on a general engagement today. Longstreet is not up. So what happens? Rhodes attacks, piecemeal. Once again, he's repulsed. But around 2 to 3 o'clock, Juba Early's division appears on the old Harrisburg Road, which is on the other side of Barlow's Knoll. We couldn't see that on a good day from here. And Ewell commits his whole forces, just like dominoes. So if you go from the north, Ewell's division comes in. He sends word to Rhodes. Rhodes therefore comes in. And then word is sent to Lee and A.P. Hill over here, and Lee commits Heath into the battle. And so once and for all, ladies and gentlemen, they finally put simultaneous pressure on that Union line, right? I always say this, like a walnut and a cracker, right? What do? A walnut's hard to crush, but when you put simultaneous pressure on it, it's going to do what? It'll crumble for you. That's right. And so the Union Army dissolves. So that's where we're going to end the narrative. Which is going to be the longest part of our tour today. How many sheets was that? No? I'm trying to see what time it is.
She's writing a grocery list.
Oh, the grocery list. I love that bread from Giant. Use the artisan bread, and I bought some olive oil that you go with it. I didn't care for the olive oil last night.
Balsamic?
Balsamic. Okay, so what we're going to do is, as we discussed earlier, the soybean patch is in my way. So, and I don't think it's going to rain. I'm just going to go ahead and make that decision. And I've delayed long enough. I've been here an hour. So we're either going to not get rained on, or we're all going to get drenched. All right, so what we're going to do is, people that are coming later, if you want to join us on the other side, for those that can't walk or don't want to walk that far, we're going to walk, the rest of us are going to walk down to the highway, and we're going to reconvene over here for a brief moment at the Thompson house, which is going to be Robert E. Lee's headquarters. That's where the cannon is going to be. Look, you're all grown Americans, most of you, and I'm not going to tell you what to do. I would suggest then instead of walking that highway, you're going to get your legs wet. That's the problem with it. That we stay in that ditch as best we can that parallels the highway. On the edge of the soybean patch is what I'm going to do. If you want to get up on that highway, you will stay drier, but that comes with its own danger. All right? Especially with people with tags from New York. All right, so we'll reconvene. If you want to follow me, we'll reconvene up here on the highway.
New Yorkers aren't the bad drivers.
Joe?
I like the pack.
What am I? I'm just gathering. You don't have to tape. I'm just gathering everybody up. So we don't get too strung out.
Looks like a yes.
Plus, my friend Mark likes to hear engines. Engines he likes to hear engines run or something. Are we going to have a problem here? She's coming with me? I guess she is. Y'all been here before?
Was this land cultivated at the time, or was it just fields or hay fields?
I don't know. It's a working farm. That's about all I'm comfortable with telling you. I can tell you though what crops are in there. I'd have to go back and look on the map. I can break down. We at the park, because of the Union engineers came in and mapped this place in the winter of '63, '64. We know where everything. So when we replace something, that's what we're referring to, is those maps. Warren maps, what you refer to there. Because he was still the chief engineer of the Army. So I'd have to look it up. Yeah, I would think they were doing something. Everybody up? Okay, so what we'll do is, I can't see right now if we've got a border along that fence. We may have a border along the fence where we can go down through there. I'd probably be better to get on the highway side, because it looks like we're going to run into some trouble down there where those little bushes are in that area. If I remember, we may have to get up on the highway to ford that ditch. It's been 2 or 3 years since I did this program, so I'm kind of unfamiliar. but I remember a log jam back there where those little bushes are. So why don't we go on the highway side of the fence, and then you can choose your path in life. Okay. What kind of hat is that? Oh, life is good. Oh, I like that one. And what about you, sir?
Penguins hockey.
Go Penguins!
I don't get it. I just don't get it. You know, it doesn't freeze where I'm from.
I don't get why we're standing here.
Me neither. But now you know the moment. It's Forrest Gump. I'm tired now. I think I'll
Let's
go.
get the general report.
Headquarters? Lee? Where does it say it is? Here or here? I'm just curious. I mean,
Cannon
hey,
says
read
it's
it to us. Go ahead, read it to us. Yeah.
Leave him alone.
He ain't reading it aloud.
There's a leak quote on the monument.
Well, the cannon says it's here. That's what the cannon says.
I'll go over briefly. Like I said, I was wanting to, I thought it was going to rain. I wasn't going to put this stop in here. I do have the information on the house. Probably the most definitive, by far the most definitive work on the Lee's headquarters is a small book by a local historian named Tim Smith. A lot of you are familiar with him with the Tim and Gary Edelman. They do a lot of photographs and super long hikes, which make me look like a wimp. You know, they'll go 3 or 4 miles or something like that. I know, I keep waiting on you to do. If you think about it though, you don't have to do this. You might want to capture it though for the camera. You don't have to move, but just turn around right here. Off Maryland Shark. This is the famous picture of the Thompson house. If you ever go home and read about the Thompson house, bam, this is where the camera was set up. Right here. You can set up where I know Tim and Gary, I'm with not on the exact spot, but it'll do for this tour, okay? So it's shot, that picture is shot from this direction. So if you want to see one of the more famous black and white photographs, General Lee's headquarters, this is the same look. And that, ladies and gentlemen, let me turn back around. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why the Civil War Trust wanted to restore this place to the way it looked in 1863. So if you know the history, the site here was actually a hotel and a restaurant. It was actually the former site, at least there was many restaurants, but it was the former site of the Appalachian Brewing Company until it moved to Steinway Avenue, if you like Gettysburg local history trivia or whatever. So there was actually, Matt actually drank many Cokes right over there, which I always think about when I drive past there. I'm like, wow, that really was there, you know. A lot of good memories. So the Thompson house, Widow Thompson, was built in 1833. In 1846, the house and 3 acres were purchased by none other than Thaddeus Stevens. Yeah, light bulb, you need to write that down. Thaddeus Stevens, you're a good sport. Mark's salivating back there, man. He likes that, man, dude. In 1846, the house and 3 acres were purchased by Thaddeus Stevens, and he bought it. The interesting thing about it is he buys it for Mary Thompson. And Thaddeus Stevens is one of those interesting characters that I guess the most you'd ever see in cinematography is the Lincoln movie. Thaddeus Stevens is has a prominent role in there, played by Tommy Lee Jones. That's right, Messiah. That's right. So Mary Thompson was born in 1793, which would make her 70 at the time of the battle. Around 1820, she married a man named Joshua Thompson, who Mary declared to be a quote-unquote habitual drunkard in 1841. Probably spent too much time on Steinware.
Oh, the brewing company, right?
At the brewing company, the new brewing company. Yeah. So he's not the first. I was not the first one to do that. That actually happened back in the 1830s and 40s. So what I'm doing is discontinuing a tradition in a historical sense. The couple soon split up, but not before having at least 8 children. Apparently they got along, at least part of the time, in 20 years of marriage. By 1863, the children were old enough to move away. That would make some mothers very happy. One was not too far though, however, because there's always one that doesn't move too far, right? And on this side of the Chambersburg Pike, oh no way, did I beg it? Oh.
No, it's not me, it's my older brother.
Oh.
Lives on his property.
Oh really? I knew a guy one time, his daughter got married and she just pulled a single wide behind the house. Then hooked into the same meter. I said, boy, you got it down. She didn't get her own pole, did she? No, tell you what.
Squatters' rights.
Yeah, Hamp hooked him up. He worked for the Trace, Natchez Trace Electricity. Small town. All right. Okay, so her son, James Thompson, and his wife and child lived in this house here. Right there. As far as the accounts that place generally in the house and those that do not, there are quite a few, and I could go through this. We're going to draw this tour out right here. Basically what you have in synopsis, and like I said, if you want to see them all, they're all in Tim Smith's book, which I think is still in publication. Some of y'all may know better than me. I think it is. You can find it. There are accounts of Lee in the house, and there's accounts of Lee outside over here in the house. In his tents, I should say. So when the War Department gets ready in the post-war years to come up and put up this marker, remember George Meade has his own cannon over by the Leicester House. The War Department, when it decides to monument or allow the monumentation of the Confederate lines, is going to have the job of picking out where the monument should go. So they need to know where to place Robert E. Lee's headquarters cannon. And so that's when a lot of this correspondence comes back and forth. In one of the first histories of the battle, Michael Jacobs records that Robert E. Lee was in the house with his headquarters staff, and here he lodged all night and took his meals in that area. That's one right there. You have one of Lee's body servants that comes back after the war and argues that Robert E. Lee was never there. He would spike. The old servant spoke in quote and spoke emphatically on this subject and said that the place was in the field immediately west of Seminary Ridge and south of Chambersburg Pike. That the building, the stone house on the north side of the road, was occupied by General Lee for a short time during the 3 days, was conceded as a possibility. But he insisted that this was only temporary. That the main headquarters were in the field, and that there was that there was where General Lee stayed when he was not engaged somewhere else on the field. So, let me just answer it this way. It would be out of character for Robert E. Lee to stay in somebody's house. In the wintertime, yeah, maybe. If he's sick, yeah. Or if it's super cold. A lot of times like around Fredericksburg, there's cases of him, this is when you got a lot of money. He would not occupy the main house, he would occupy one of the outbuildings. Sometimes they put an office outside or something like that. So my best guess is, in keeping with his habits, he would have stayed over here. And I have to suppose that the War Department is going to get that right. All right. So that's my best guess. I will also point out to you as an extra added bonus, and I'm getting way off in the weeds, so if you don't need to, this is not part of the tour, but if you ever read that account by Imboden, however you pronounce it, the Confederate general, how do you pronounce it?
Imboden.
If you think about it, one of the more famous accounts of the Confederate retreat and of Robert E. Lee comes from Imboden's account in Battles and Leaders of the Civil War. And Imboden went to find Robert E. Lee after Pickett's charge. I'm getting way ahead of the story here. But he found Robert E. Lee over at General Hill's headquarters, A.P. Hill's headquarters, which was at the Brown Ranch, which is, as the crow flies, not that far from here, maybe a mile, we'll say. Lee tells him when he comes out of the tent to ride here to the Thompson house and to wait him, because he had special orders for him. And that is when, at this spot, Imboden is going to be standing here, and he's going to see, it was a full moon that night, about midnight on July 3rd, and Robert E. Lee, take away these modern buildings you see right here, Robert E. Lee comes riding up from the south, headed to the north, and that's when Imboden notes in that famous account him seeing Lee silhouetted against the moonlight right there. Lee is going to pull Traveler up to somewhere in this area. And Imboden, this is the best account I know of Robert E. Lee's health during the Battle of Gettysburg. He is going to note that when Robert E. Lee dismounted off a Traveler, the very act of dismounting off that horse is going to exhaust Robert E. Lee. He's literally going to have to lean against the saddle to catch his breath. Which leads me to believe the prior account with him being in the prime of his health at 5'11" and 1/2 inches may be just a little bit of post-war. My God, there he is himself. Turn the camera around. Good God himself. I know him if I saw him 500 miles. General Lee! General Lee! General Lee! You can't beat that. You can't beat that with a damn iron fork right there, I guarantee. And I want you to know that I had all this set up for you. Right over here. Well, we should go see him. Have his story told right over there. Yeah. I told you he was over here. What's he doing over there? Who would have thought it? He's probably planning his battle. Only in Gettysburg. I tell you though, as a short aside, we won't go across there because I probably killed more of you than I saved crossing the highway.
Where's my rifle?
Your rifle? Good God, sir, would you would be a Roman soldier in Jerusalem. If you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, only in Gettysburg you see Robert E. Lee. Probably the weirdest thing that I ever saw in the town of Gettysburg as far as uniforms. I've seen a lot of weird things over time. Because I was sitting in a restaurant on Steinway, the Avenue, back before it was the new Avenue. And I was sitting there, in the window, and I swear to you, this dude walked past me dressed in chainmail. Never seen anything like that before. Never seen anything like it since. But I had to give him kudos for originality right there. Oh, look, General Lee posing for pictures. Can't beat that. All right, we're going to walk up here to the sidewalk. You can all wave at General Lee as we go by right here, and we're going to make the corner and we'll go up to the seminary. Hopefully this fog is blown off a little bit, burn off a little bit, so we can see Cemetery Hill. We'll pick up Robert E. Lee up there. I thought about hooking one up. Y'all watch that car behind you. All right, real quick, this wasn't a planned stop, but this picture was taken right here. It's one of the more iconic photographs from the entire Civil War. But this picture was taken right here along with this present day, modern day stone wall. So I thought you might want to look at that. It's pretty cool. All right, so let's take a walk.
We're almost as confused as Lee.
No, I saw it.
That's all right. He's just playing Jeff Stewart. Let him go.
He runs some energy off. He'll be back. My dad used to lose his bird dogs all the time. In fact, he kept losing the same one out in Texas. He finally just told the guy, "You want him?" And he left him in Texas. I don't know what the heck. All right, let's walk on down. He'll find him. Okay. How'd you like that little jaunt? I get your blood flowing right there? Yep. People that walk every day, especially up the rear visitor center entrance and almost get run over by cars as they're pedaling their bike, should appreciate safety along the highway. Right here. All right. Okay, so let's set it up. At our last stop, which was not our last stop, but our last stop about General Lee, guess what we did? We talked about the Union Army being crushed. Remember when I talked about the walnut, you put it in the cracker and so forth, and then it breaks apart? Union Army's going to pieces. Thousands of Union soldiers are coming through here. If you take away the development, which none of this is here, if you go to the visitor center and you walk in and there's a, I don't know what you call it, rotunda, you go between the ticket counter and you go back to where the theaters are. There's that big circular thing with the big black and white pictures. Those pictures were taken approximately from You can't beat that. Did you pick that up on camera? Dixie horn. I mean,
That was a plan.
oh, it could have been a two-wheel jalopy. That would have been cool right there. I don't know.
I think it was.
All right. So, Union Army's been crushed. They're fleeing back through the town of Gettysburg. Robert E. Lee is probably not right on the heels of it, but within the aftermath of that, Lee is going to ride up to Seminary Ridge. Now, the reason I brought you over here, if you see those two, what kind of trees are those? The park ranger's asking you what kind of trees it is, all right? You see those two dark green trees right there. You see that blue water tank? That's Cemetery Hill. That is where the Union Army is starting to regroup. Take away the development. Robert E. Lee, from somewhere on this hill in this vicinity, could have very easily seen Cemetery Hill. The thing that grabs me, ladies and gentlemen, I try to never forget, is when I first got here to Gettysburg, and not within the first few days, but in the first few years, it never ceases to surprise me, if you look at Gettysburg from a higher elevation, how small this town is really. It is not that far as the crow flies from here to Cemetery Hill. So Lee does have a good vantage point, once again, for what he can see and what he can't see. All right, so one of the biggest debates in Gettysburg lore is whether Richard Ewell, the Confederate Corps commander, Lee's subordinate, should have tried to attack Cemetery Hill. Countless historians have weighed in on this subject. All right, Captain James Smith, Confederate veteran, the guy that escorted Stonewall Jackson's widow to her father's house, said in the aftermath of the war that General Hancock wrote a letter January 17th, 1878. This is the Union general speaking, who's in charge over there. In my opinion, if the Confederates had continued their pursuit of General Howard on the afternoon of the first day of July, at Gettysburg, they would have driven him over and beyond Cemetery Hill. After I had arrived upon the field, assumed the command, and made my disposition for defending that point, I do not think the Confederate force then present could have carried it. That's the knife turning. Right there. That's the Hancock-Howard controversy, which is not part of this program. But you'll have to research yourself. All right, noted First historian of Gettysburg, Colonel John B. Batchelder. Should the Confederates have attacked, tried to take the hill as the Union's reforming? He would say, there is no question but what a combined attack on Cemetery Hill made within an hour would have been successful. At the end of an hour, the troops had been rallied, occupied strong positions, were covered by stone walls, and under the command and magnetic influence of General Hancock, who in the meantime had reached the field. They would, in my opinion, have held the position against any attack from the troops then up. That's one sentence. So what he's basically saying, Batchelder is saying, is the Confederates can attack within an hour and they have an opportunity, but after that, it's not that clear cut right there. He doesn't think it could happen. That's all fine and good, people, but think about it. Let's go back to 1863. We all know how we got here. We have Middle Street, we have Washington Street, and that's how we got here from the Visitor Center. We drove up Middle Street where a nice little sign with a star on it pointed us over to stop number 1. We then pulled in there, we had some light refreshments, and then we conducted the tour starting at 10 o'clock. It's all laid out for us. You even had directions to it at the Visitor Center. In 1863, you were talking about a Confederate army that has just driven not one but 2 Union corps off this battlefield and crushed them. That comes with a heavy price. It's not like the Union troops just left. They inflicted heavy damage, equal damage you could argue, on the Confederate forces as they did on them, except for the number of people captured. The Confederate Army is at a situation where they don't know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're caught in between 2 sets of orders. They've got the overriding orders from the morning saying not to bring on a general engagement. And then they've got the rest of the day where they did slightly bring on a general engagement with the Union Army. So what do you revert to as the sun starts to set on July 1st and that Union Army is regrouping over there? And once again, if Batchelder's right, if they have to attack within the hour, most Confederate units involved in combat suffered roughly about 20 to 25% casualties on July 1st. You take out the corps officers, miscellaneous officers that are hit across the field, colonels down to captains, lieutenants, and so forth. You take away the losses of the sergeants and so forth, and just keep good privates. Then you take away the men that are going to leave no matter what at the first opportunity. Whether they were hungry, whether they were escorting prisoners, whether they were picking up wounded, or they're just leaving. You've always got that attrition that goes on in there. The fundamental question is, could Richard Ewell, old baldhead, have pulled together an attack within 1 hour of the Union line collapsing? That's the fundamental question. And if I didn't put the obstacles any clear enough, he's got to get through the town. He's got a town in front of him. All right, so let's see what he had set up. Was it practicable? There's a good word. This is what General Lee wrote in his after-action report. Without information as to its proximity, the strong position which the enemy had assumed could not be attacked without danger of exposing the 4 divisions present, already weakened and exhausted by a long and bloody struggle, to overwhelming numbers of fresh troops. General Ewell was therefore instructed to carry the hill occupied by the enemy if he found it practicable, but to avoid a general engagement until the arrival of the other divisions of the army, which were ordered to hasten forward. How in the heck do you attack the hill and not bring on a general engagement? Y'all didn't like the emphasis with the phone? That was a new one. I just thought up off the top of my head. No? Not good? All right. Remember, this report, though, is written on January 20th, 1864. That's, 6 months after the battle. Keep that in mind, because I'm going to come back to that. What is Ewell doing? James Smith of Ewell's staff. About 5 o'clock, I rode with General Ewell and staff into the town square of Gettysburg. The square was filled. The square is right over there. See off in the distance. See the tan-looking building? Over there, that's the square. The square was filled with Confederate soldiers, and with them were mingled many prisoners, while scarcely a citizen was to be seen. As our corps commander sat in his saddle under the shade of a tree, I'd love to know where that was, a young officer brought from a cellar a bottle of wine, which the general pleasantly declined. While he chatted amiably with his men, and the Federal prisoners gathered about him, it was a moment of most critical importance, more evidently critical to us now than it would seem to anyone then. Monday morning quarterbacking is what he's saying. It wasn't that important at the time. But even then, some of us who had served on Jackson's staff sat in a group in our saddles, and one said sadly, "Jackson is not here." Our corps commander, General Ewell, as true a Confederate soldier as ever went into battle, was simply waiting for orders, when every moment of time could not be balanced with gold. General Early and Rhodes came with great earnestness and animation to tell of the advanced position. They desired General Lee to be informed that they could go forward and take Cemetery Hill if they were supported on their right, that to the south of the cemetery there was in sight a position commanding it which should be taken at once. And I was sent by General Ewell to deliver the message to the commanding general. This is pretty cool. Smith goes to see Lee with Early and Rhodes' information. I found General Lee quite well to the right in an open field. I don't know what quite well to the right would mean. In an open field with General Longstreet dismounted and with glasses inspecting the position to the south of Cemetery Hill. We'll see that in a minute. When I delivered my message, General Lee gave me his glasses and said that the elevated position in front was, he supposed, the commanding position of which Early and Rhodes spoke of. That some of, quote unquote, I love this about General Lee, those people were there. That he had no force on the field with which to take that position. And turning to Longstreet, asked where his troops were, and expressed the wish that they might be brought immediately to the front. General Longstreet replied that his front division, McLaws, was about 6 miles away, and then was indefinite and non-committal. General Lee directed me to say to General Ewell, now this is the key point. Remember, I said practicable in Lee's report. Smith remembers it this way, and it changes the whole context of it if you're a wordsmith. General Lee directed me to say to General Ewell that, quote, he regretted that his people were not up to support him on the right, but he wished him to take the Cemetery Hill if it were possible, and that he would ride over and see him very soon. Practicable and possible versus possible. Walter Taylor, shorter quote. Staff officer, Chief of Staff of Robert E. Lee. General Lee witnessed the flight of the Federals through Gettysburg and up the hills beyond. He then directed me to go to General Ewell and to say to him that from the position which he occupied, he could see the enemy retreating over those hills without organization and in great confusion, that it was only necessary to press those people in order to secure possession of the heights, and that, if possible, he wished him to do this. In obedience to these instructions, I proceeded immediately to General Ewell and delivered the order of General Lee. Ewell did not express any objection or indicate the existence of any impediment to the execution of the order conveyed to him, but left the impression upon my mind that it would be executed. In the exercise of that discretion, however, which General Lee was accustomed to accord to his lieutenants, and probably because of undue regard for his admonition, given earlier in the day, not to precipitate a general engagement. Precipitate. General Ewell deemed it unwise to make the pursuit. Any questions? I don't think General Lee's verbal order that day contained the words practicable, as often quoted by us. There's two sources that say the message delivered to Ewell is much more clear. Take the hill if possible, if you want to. I know it's semantics, but if you think about it, it changes it, because we've always been twisting in the wind about how you can send an order to take a hill if practicable, but not bring on a general engagement. When Taylor and Marshall sit down and write Lee's report 6 months later, they combined, I think in my opinion, two different orders. They combined, I'll have to read it again, but in Lee's report they combined do not bring on a general engagement, which was the order earlier in that day, with the wrong, what is that, verb, practicable instead of possible. All right, so they get it. The report is not clear, and that's what most historians are basing it on. All right, any questions? All right, let's get going here. Okay, one thing, we're going to make we'll all gather up here again at the stop sign, and our longest wait, really, we don't have that far to go. We're going to go down to our last stop. I want to show you something at the stop sign. I'll show you something else at the red light, but getting that red light to change is always tricky, to say the least. In fact, I avoid it at all costs, but I don't have a choice this time. Any questions? No? What about the young lads over there hiding on the sidewalk? Good God. No? All right, let's walk up to the stop sign. Magician. He may be a prophet, but he's not a magician. And he can't, even Jackson can't, I don't think, can get those troops through there and redeployed. He also, in Ewell's defense, Ewell does not know his losses that day. Folks, this is not a video game. All right, you don't know how much ammo you got left, how much health you got left. This is a real-time exercise with tens of thousands of men, and there are no ready reports saying, well, this brigade doesn't need to be involved, or this brigade is ready to go because it's had light casualties. He doesn't probably have that good information at his fingertips.
Well, he also has to use infantry as a flanking protection when he sends Walker's guys away because Stewart's not there. And there's also concerns about troops on the York Road. So that he's distracted beyond just deciding whether or not he should attack.
Yes. Everything you said is true, but you're a little bit ahead of my narrative, right? No. I don't know if I would have covered that anyway, John. But yes, later in the afternoon, that does become, for Ewell, it really becomes a problem. The reason I stopped here, and you're gonna have to bend your eyes if that's the proper word right here, is how many shells are in houses in this town? Does anybody know? 10 something? I don't know, something like that. I don't know the exact number. If you look at the white door, obviously on the bottom, if you look to the right, it's right under the white porch. You can see a black dot underneath there. That is one of the Civil War shells that's embedded in there. You see it? Come over here. See the white door? Look upwards. It's right. See that white porch right under the
American flag? Under the American.
Just to the left of the column on the right there.
Yeah. Where you go up the porch, the second column on the right is right to the left. Second column from the left, right? It's right to the left of that column. I got it right that time. Hey!
Yeah, but is it above the American flag? Yeah, it's above the flag to the right.
What flag?
This is the little American flag. You don't see that?
Oh yeah. I see that.
I got better.
We were discussing eyeglasses last night.
Better one or better two?
No, actually, I sincerely didn't see it. It blends in the bricks. You see it?
See the blue.
I want you to notice right now the difference in ages and people that can see the flag and people that can't see the flag. That'll tell you all you need to know about getting old, right?
It's like from here to here to my hand. That's kind of that.
You see it? All right. You see it? You see it? The flag. You see the flag? You don't see the flag either, do you? All right. Yeah, that's cool. Any questions? Confederate shell or Union shell? I bet that's a Union shell. It had to be a Union shell. Cannonball hits your house 150 years later, you can put an extra 20 grand on the asking price, right? Not a bad deal, I wouldn't say. It's an investment. No? Not good. All right, so we're going to about face. We're going to go up to the red light, and we're going to cross over. I think we've got we've got buttons up there, and we'll cross over. Where's my bike rider? She would know. She bikes all the time. Where'd she go? There's a button up there, right? For the red light? Okay, all right. We're going to step up here to the red light. Who's got the button? Yes, because Matt, you'll see Matt sitting, resting against the back table and just watching. They like to talk. I done told people 500,000 times where that bathroom is. I have nothing else to give the American public. Except...
They sell that house?
I don't think so. I don't think this thing's still for sale. Was it 1 point?
899,000.
Oh, making an even $895.
That,
Sold. $899, huh?
That's that habitual drinking.
Habitual drunkard.
Same thing.
Possibly. What did I do with that? Okay. Schultz house. Okay, this house, sorry, I forgot to stop when I could have stopped back there. But the famous, iconic house, which everybody would love to have, except for me, because there's too many people come. This is on the main tour road. This is too many people. It was built in somewhere around 1837 by Herman Happ. And it was a guy probably most of you have never heard of. But if you are glad that the United States won the Civil War, you can thank Herman Happ. Because Herman Happ was not a general. Herman Happ was a railroad man. And Herman Happ made the trains run on time. And I'm not slighting him a bit. They fired him, or he quit at one point in the war, and they had to tuck tail between their legs and go back and invite him back. Because they couldn't make it work without him, you know, on that military railroad. Ironically, he's going to be living right there. He was a West Point graduate. The front of the house, I didn't know this, still has the remnants of 2 cannonballs. You get 2 cannonballs in your house, that's an extra $150,000 on the asking price right there, that were shot at the house. The home is the only Victorian structure in this area of the Lutheran Technological Seminary. So that's pretty cool. I have looked at it via Realtor.com, and the inside of it's absolutely gorgeous. The woodwork on it and everything else. Oh, it is, yeah. So yeah, it's really beautiful inside. So asking price is asking price right there. If all of you would like to go to the GoFundMe campaign for Matt to buy the Schultz house, I'd be very welcome to do that. I'd appreciate it. Any questions? Let's go on down a little bit further to Red Patch. I'll read you a brief quote there. Okay. I'm just guessing, all right, but I think this home is named Red Patch. All right, and if I had to guess, it was actually bought by Brevet Major General Charles Collis from New York City. So, beautiful house. I've been in there once for a wedding. The General Sickles, not my own, General Sickles' birthday party is held here every winter, or it has been recently. I can't speak for this year. So that there's nobody in town, but all the locals gather for. A few people come in. I've seen Sickles' grandson, great-grandson at one of those gatherings. It's pretty cool right there. Beautiful view though off the back porch. Obviously we're not going to go back there. The name Red Patch though, I should point out, is derived from the Corps symbol. That's where he's going to get it from. Now, one time when it was, I think it was a B&B, don't quote me on that, but I believe the different bedrooms were named for Union generals. And that's pretty common among B&Bs here. Anything to add? No? Alright, so we're at the Guard Armory. Let's just walk a little bit further past the Guard Armory and we'll conclude the tour over here where you can see Cemetery Hill. Whew, I need some ice cream. Yeah. Y'all meet in college? High school?
After college.
Dating site? Mutual friends?
Kinda, sorta, I guess.
At the ice cream joint?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Let's talk about it one more time. What are Ewell's options at the close of the first day? Let's attack this hill. What are we going to do? I don't like dried nuts, fruit. Don't find it very good. It dries my mouth out. It tastes weird too. All right, so what are the options for Ewell? He could attack with Rhodes and Early. Possibly Johnson. But what Ewell is apparently arguing is that he does not want to make that attack on Cemetery Hill unless Cemetery Hill is being attacked from the west. And the reason I walked you all the way down here to the Guard Armory for July 1st is now you can see the blue water tank, which is East Cemetery Hill right there. If you follow along, you see I guess that's baseball field lights right there in front of you. If you look behind the baseball field lights, you see that tall monument up there. That's the New York State Monument. And that is literally within the National Cemetery in that area. So you get all that. You can see now, if you keep following the wood line to your right off in the distance, now you can see, ladies and gentlemen, how big Cemetery Hill is. You can't see it when you're in the National Cemetery because of the trees. You don't realize how big that thing is. But that is a huge hill. And there, without the trees on that hill, you could have seen thousands of Union troops trying to regroup up there. So what can Ewell do? He could attack with Rhodes. Rhodes has already attacked twice. He could attack with Early. And if Johnson can get up, he might could do it. Now, he needs A.P. Hill to call up somebody and attack from this direction, at least according to Ewell. Alright, so that's one action. He could attack. Another option for Ewell, he could seize Culp's Hill. Instead of attacking Cemetery Hill, he could try to seize Culp's. For those of you not oriented, Culp's Hill is behind Cemetery Hill. We can't see it. Or the third option open to Ewell is he could consolidate. Alright, so on July 1st, there were roughly 23,000 Confederate infantry engaged versus 18,800 Union infantry and cavalry. 23 versus 19. Heath, Pender, and Rhodes, 16,000 men, were against the 1st Corps. 7 of the 10 brigades in those 3 divisions incurred casualties of 35 to 50%. The total for all brigades came to 6,300 officers and men, or about 40%. In fighting the 11th out of Rhodes and Early's divisions, Gordon's brigade suffered the most, 30%. Overall, the Confederate units suffered only 14% casualties fighting the 11th Corps. There's a lot of units not involved, though, in the fighting, so that dilutes the total number of casualties. Out of all the divisions present on the field, Early's was probably in the best shape. All right, in addition to that, if you want to attack, they had gathered up approximately 3,600 Union prisoners, which is not easy to guard. And like I said earlier, there's always somebody wanting to leave for some pretext, right? Okay, so he's got 3,600 Union prisoners, he's got a town to navigate and deploy, and he's got a lack of intelligence of what lies beyond Cemetery Hill. Meanwhile, back in town, Ewell is preparing to move. Campbell Brown, Ewell's stepson and staff officer, left the best recollection. Brown met Ewell as the latter entered Gettysburg amid the divisions of Rhodes and Early, which were mingling in the advance. What does that mean? Units were getting jammed together. If you want to make an attack, you need unit cohesion, and that is falling apart on these tight streets in Gettysburg with thousands of men. Early soon appeared and joined Ewell. Riding ahead, quote, they surveyed the ground and examined the position and force on Cemetery Hill. Having concluded to attack, if Hill concurred, General Ewell ordered Early and Rhodes to get ready. End of quote. Just then a messenger arrived from Extra Billy Smith and said an enemy of force was approaching from the rear. Early doubted the accuracy of the intelligence but suggested they halt until the report was confirmed. Ewell concurred and said, quote, meantime I shall get Rhodes into position and communicate with A.P. Hill. So Ewell is actually making the beginnings of an attack. Staff officer galloped in search of Hill and returned with intelligence. With the intelligence that Hill was not advancing on Cemetery Hill. Lee was there and, quote, left it to General Ewell's discretion whether or not to advance alone or not. Hill clearly intended to offer no support, and Johnson's division had not yet reached the battlefield. Moreover, Rhodes reported that only 3 of his brigades were in good condition, while Early also had only 3 within easy distance. All right, here's the big quote. It was, as I have always understood, with the express concurrence of both Rhodes and Early, concluded Campbell Brown, and largely in consequence of the inactivity of the troops under General Lee's own eye, that Ewell finally decided to make no direct attack, but to wait for Johnson's coming up and with his fresh troops seize and hold the high peak to our left of Cemetery Hill. That is Culp's Hill. The discovery that this lost us the battle is one of those frequently recurring but tardy strokes of military genius, of which one hears long after the minute circumstances that rendered them at the time impracticable are forgotten. What is he saying? Monday morning quarterbacking. So, to rehash, Ewell's getting ready to attack with 2 divisions. As he's getting ready to attack Cemetery Hill, word comes that Union forces are approaching from the other side of town. Early doesn't believe it. Ewell says we can't afford not to believe it. He detaches Extra Billy Smith, who basically had not been involved in much combat. His Virginia force is sent out on the road, York Road, in order to intercept that Union force, which does not exist. That cost them or delayed them a heavy time. All right, so time ticks along. Ewell looks back through his binoculars. Guess what's up on that hill by now? A lot of Union troops. All right. So now Ewell dispatches his staff officers to Culp's Hill. And they come back and tell him that Culp's Hill is unoccupied. And that's where Ewell is going to make his focus from now. from now on. All right. So what Union troops, if Ewell wanted to attack, what Union troops does he have to defend the hill? The 1st Corps numbered 8,500 men at the beginning of the battle. They have 5,500 casualties, of which 2,000 were captured. The 11th Corps had 6,000 men plus Coster's brigades of 1,400 men for 7,400 total. 3,000 will become casualties, or almost 40%. At 5 o'clock, to back up a little bit, the surviving Union soldiers begin to receive reinforcements. And you will remember I'm getting off Orlando Smith. Is it Orlando Smith?
Orlando Smith. Yep.
Orland? Oh, I had an O on the end of it. Does it not? I don't know. The surviving Union soldiers, Orland?
Orland?
Not Orlando, not Tony Orlando.
Not Tony Orlando, no. Smith's brigade's already in place. They had 800 men still there on guard duty from the 11th and 1st Corps that had not been engaged. And General Stannard's 2,100 men and 3 regiments were coming up at 5 o'clock. Quickly coming up, 2 brigades of Gary's division of the 12th Corps took position on Cemetery Ridge just north of Little Round Top. So they're extending the line down, basically where Stop 15 is. By 6 o'clock, these reinforcements had increased the Union strength to 20,000 men. By 6 o'clock. By dusk, 2 brigades of the 3rd Corps under Birney arrived along with Williams' division of the 12th Corps for a total of 27,000 men. So that's roughly an hour or two later. Artillery support. 41 guns of the 1st and 11th Corps. 20 of the 20th Corps. 18 attached to Birney, 6 guns with Buford's cavalry. They had a total of 85 guns available, the Union Army alone. How many did the Confederates have? Anderson's division has 7,100 men and 5 brigades that have been unengaged, and they're the closest right here. Anderson's division is the one that has to attack if they're going to take Cemetery Hill. Now, where's Dick Anderson? In a July 29th, 1863 letter from Abner Perrin to Governor Bonham of South Carolina, Pender told him, Perrin stated that Pender told him to rest the brigade because he had sent for Anderson to come up. Penderton was dead by now, so this is all third-hand information. Quote, but neither Anderson nor his division was anywhere to be found. Though admitting he did not know whether Hill or Anderson was responsible, he bluntly pronounced Anderson's failure to be up as the cause of the failure of the campaign. But, in the aftermath of the war, ladies and gentlemen, Anderson will report that he was getting ready to come up. And he didn't, as he got ready to come up, he talked to General Lee. And General Lee told him that General Anderson is my only reserves. And if I throw him in, basically, what am I going to have left? And it was actually General Lee's decision not to engage Anderson's division. Now, where I'm kind of cloudy, and I don't know if it'll ever be mixed up, is when you read like 5, 6, 7, 8 accounts of the same event, the timing on things are very hard to put together. That's why you have different histories of the Battle of Gettysburg, and that's why they vary slightly. Because one historian will say, well, it happened in this order, and other historians happened in this order. Had Lee, my question is, had Lee already told Anderson to stand down by the time he sent the order to Ewell to take the hill if possible? I don't know. What was the order of that? I don't know whether it occurred before or after. That's a good question to try to find out. But it would just boil down to making a judgment call right there. Generally, it is conceded that Anderson's division was here by 5 o'clock p.m. And that he could have been up in time. The bottom line is this: Lee's presence on Seminary Ridge and knowledge of the pertinent facts rather than Hill, A.P. Hill, made Lee primarily responsible for the decision not to press the Federals along A.P. Hill's front after 4:30 p.m. That's Robert E. Lee's decision, not to attack across through here. Remember, the neighborhood's not here. The ball fields, all this would have been wide open. Anderson's division would have attacked from this general vicinity right here. All right, in conclusion, well, I've given y'all a lot of information. You know, it hadn't been that hot, though. Wind hadn't blown for us, but we hadn't had any sun. I mean, I've been on worse hikes, right? In 1868, Lee wrote a post-war letter to Major William McDonald, a gentleman that had solicited Lee's opinion on a school history he was writing about Gettysburg. Lee responded, "As to the Battle of Gettysburg, I must again refer you to the official accounts. Its loss was occasioned by a combination of circumstances. It was commenced in the absence of correct intelligence. It was continued in the effort to overcome the difficulties by which we were surrounded. And it would have been gained could one determined united blow have been delivered by our whole line. As it was, victory trembled in the balance for 3 days, and the battle resulted in the infliction of as great amount of injury as was received, and in frustrating the Federal campaign for the season." That is what Lee thought of the Battle of Gettysburg. If he could have just got his army to attack as one whole line, the Battle of Gettysburg would have been gained. Is that good enough? Good enough? All right, ladies and gentlemen. I just don't have enough energy left today to give you a sounding flourish today. Thank y'all very much. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hardest critics are always in the back.
Him?
Right there. Yeah, the lacrosse guy. Always look up. Thank you. I appreciate that, sir. I know you're a student of the battle, so that means extra special. And I appreciate the teacher and the teacher's husband coming. And I appreciate the doctor and the doctor's father coming. And the doctor's son coming. And the mysterious man that shoots deer but never says anything. It's always in the forefront. And the note taker. And Tardy Bob right over here. Good government worker, never on time. Retired where it is.
One last question.
Yes.
Where's my car?
Where's your car? Probably your best bet. Probably your best bet. And y'all got a wide, take it, you know, you can go across that soybean patch if you want to. That'd be the shortest route. The second shortest route would be to take a left at the red light and walk the highway. I would go against traffic. There is a wide shoulder on that highway, and I see a lot of joggers and runners, walkers up and down that highway. Where's the bike lady? She's still here. So it's relatively safe, but I would go against traffic if I was you. But probably I would just follow the tour road, go down there and make an L, if you will, down through there. Be your best bet. I wouldn't go all the way back to the Thompson house unless you want to talk to General Lee over there. You there. Thank y'all very much. I really appreciate it.